Good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Trumbore with your nightly review for Tuesday, April 23rd. It's 4:02 p.m. Eastern Time. It's chaos around here. My main financial screen suddenly went out. They're building a house back here. I've been waiting for this nightmare to start. They're at the hammer phase. So that kind of sucks. But it was a strange day, complete with a minutes-long flash crash over a hack attack on the AP's Twitter feed, where a dirtball planted a story that the White House was under attack and that President Obama was injured. So the Dow Jones was up about 130 points at the time. Immediately it crashed to unchanged. Then when the story proved false, the market rallied back to up 130. So I am upping my dirtball index to 52, as in 52% of the people in the world are dirtballs. Meanwhile, the market actually finished up 150 points to 14,718, up 1%. S&P 500 finished up 1% as well at 1578. NASDAQ finished up 36. I'm glancing over to catch some earnings. AT&T essentially in line, down a little in the aftermarket. So NASDAQ finished up 36 points, 1.1% to 3270. Gold 1414. Oil 89.30, and the 10-year Treasury 1.70%. And we're waiting for Apple. I think sometimes they come in closer to 430. Overseas, a heck of a lot was happening. Briefly in China, the Shanghai Composite was down 2.6%. HSBC's preliminary reading on China manufacturing, the PMI, came in at 50.5 for April. This is the preliminary estimate, down from 51.6 in March. That's not good. The exports component of the PMI was down big. HSBC economist Hong Bin Q said weaker demand was starting to weigh on employment. That's not good. Kit Yucks, a strategist at Societe Generale, said the importance of the China PMI has as much to do with what it says about global demand as much as the message about the Chinese economy. The export weakness tells us that demand elsewhere is soft, which we suspected anyway, and the ongoing rebalancing of the economy continues to argue for potential weakness in industrial commodities. And then there was Europe, where bad was very good today. The European markets had their biggest rally in 8 months. London up 2%, Paris up 3.6%, Frankfurt up 2.4%, Spain's stock market up 3.3%, Italy's up 3%. So how did this come about? Well, it came about because the economic news out of Europe was absolutely dreadful. The market, M-A-R-K-I-T, flash composite PMI, so composite PMI services and manufacturing, for April, for the Eurozone as a whole, came in at 46.5, unchanged from a month ago. Of course, 50 is the dividing line between growth and contraction. This is the 15th month in a row the Eurozone has contracted, the 19th decline in the PMI in 20 months. German manufacturing, let me back up, the German composite, again, services and manufacturing fell to 48.8 in April. That is not good. A 6-month low. German manufacturing, the manufacturing component of the PMI, was 47.9. Services 49.2. And that's supposed to be the engine of Europe. France did supply a bit of good news, but its composite rose from a putrid 41.9 in March to 44.2 in April, again according to Markit and its flash composite. Euro area services rose to 46.6 from 46.4. Manufacturing for the whole Eurozone fell to 46.5 from 46.8. Chris Williamson, chief economist at Markit, said although the PMI was unchanged in April, the comp, the survey is signaling a worrying weakness in the economy at the start of the second quarter, which with signs that the downturn is more likely to intensify further in coming months rather than ease. So all of this spurred lots of talk, and the stock markets rallied in Europe, that the European Central Bank will finally lower its benchmark interest rate from the long-standing 0.75%. Bond markets in Europe rallied big time. Portugal's 10-year yield, despite all the problems it's had and continues to have, 10-year down to 5.74%, the lowest since October 2010. Spain's 10-year is down to 4.28%, best since November of 2010. Italy's is down to 3.97%, best since November 2010, despite all the problems Italy has in forming a new government. The maybe 87-year-old, soon-to-be 88-year-old Giorgio Napolitano can put together that grand coalition that the markets seem to think is a fait accompli. Lena Komoliva at G+ Economics said the figures in Europe were sufficiently weak to intensify the pressure on the European Central Bank to cut rates in June. She said with Germany unable to offset the austerity and credit crunch drag on growth in the periphery, Spain, Italy, Portugal, Greece, and with excess capacity growing and business expectations falling, the only question is why the ECB has not cut rates already. So in Europe, the weak PMI only reinforces the belief again that it's time for the ECB to act and lower rates and or initiate a QE, quantitative easing type program. While in a speech in Brussels, and this was very important, European Commission President Jose Manuel Barroso said the EU should place a greater emphasis on policies that stimulate growth and less on so-called austerity measures such as cutting government spending. Barroso said, while I think this policy, austerity, is fundamentally right, I think it has reached its limits. And of course all these awful economic barometers back that up. A policy to be successful not only has to be properly designed, it has to have a minimum of political and social support. A senior source told the Irish Independent that in terms of the Troika, the European Commission, European Central Bank, and IMF, Barroso's statement moves the EC closer to the IMF. That strengthens the hand of the governments in terms of negotiations. The leaders of the two of the three elements of the Troika are saying that there has to be more flexibility. That's the ECB and IMF, and now the EC is coming around. But it is also a question of what he is going to do, Barroso, to back it up. Barroso's comments on austerity were tempered by those from German Chancellor Angela Merkel in Berlin, who said Eurozone members must be prepared to surrender more authority to European institutions if the continent was to avoid decline. Europe must have the last word, Merkel said. And just another signal that Berlin backs stricter Europe-wide controls over national budgets. European leaders are meeting in June for a very, very important meeting to move forward the discussion on a true fiscal union and a banking supervisor, which they agreed to in principle like last June, and nothing has transpired since. Japanese Prime Minister Abe warned China of military action over a potential landing on the disputed islands in the East China Sea. Japan would respond with force if any attempt is made to land on these islands, Abe warned. This comment came as 8 Chinese government ships sailed near the East China Sea islands that both nations claim. A flotilla of 10 fishing boats carrying Japanese activists was also reported to be in the area, as well as the Japanese Coast Guard. Then you have this freaking problem with the Yasukuni Shrine in Japan, which commemorates Japan's war dead, including war criminals. This comes up every freaking year. So a total of 168 Japanese lawmakers, of course, went to Yasukuni in a move that every year pisses off the Chinese and the South Koreans. The visit to Yasukuni marked the Spring Festival. South Korea subsequently canceled a proposed visit by its foreign minister, while China lodged solemn representations. A Chinese foreign ministry spokesman said only when Japan faces up to its aggressive past can it embrace the future and develop friendly relations with its Asian neighbors. But in Japan itself, Prime Minister Abe has a 70% approval rating since his election in December. In Libya, a car bomb targeted the French embassy. I saw pictures of the damage. The damage was huge. Set a fire to the embassy itself, burned out a few offices. Amazingly, only 2 French guards suffered injuries. I don't think they were life-threatening, but that is a out-and-out major terror attack on a foreign embassy in lovely Libya. Cross that off your bucket list for now. Yesterday I told you about the death toll in Syria in a Damascus suburb as the Syrian army launches a major offensive to take the suburbs back. The Jerusalem Post reported today that the death toll could be as high as 500 in this particular offensive against this one suburb. A senior Israeli military official said Syrian forces have used chemical weapons against rebels several times. Brigadier General Itai Brun said military intelligence believed the nerve agent sarin had probably been used in a number of incidents. But Secretary of State John Kerry said Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had not been able to confirm Brigadier General Brun's claim. Speaking at a security conference in Jerusalem, General Brun said, "To the best of our professional understanding, the regime has made use of deadly chemical weapons against the rebels in a number of incidents in the past." Which chemical weapons? Apparently sarin. The regime is also using, this is General Brune, is also using chemical weapons that neutralize and are not fatal. I've noted before that the Assad regime might just be testing the U.S., probing to see what kind of response. On Monday, Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel in Israel said that the use of chemical weapons by Syria would be a game changer, which echoes President Obama in December, who said that Assad would face consequences if he uses such weapons. I think you can see why Netanyahu is hesitant to confirm General Brune's claims thus far. Finally, a USA Today poll finds support for a new gun control law ebbing as prospects for passage on Capitol Hill seem to fade. The USA Today poll finds that by 49 to 45%, those surveyed favor Congress passing a new gun control law, but an NBC Wall Street Journal poll in early April had 55% backing a stricter gun law, and that was down from 61% in February. Stuart Rothenberg, editor and publisher of the nonpartisan Rothenberg Political Report, an excellent report, said so much of the support for gun control is emotional following the Newtown tragedy. You know, that was back in December. The longer you get away from there, people start thinking of other issues. They start thinking about terrorism or jobs or immigration, and not surprisingly then some of the momentum behind gun control starts to fade. And of course the Boston Marathon bombings last week clearly had, or potentially have had an effect. It wouldn't be shocking, says Rothenberg, if people sitting in their homes in Massachusetts cities and towns thought to themselves, boy, I wish I had something to protect myself from a terrorist, or protect myself with if a terrorist came through the door. On immigration, support for taking action is strong. This is the USA Today poll. 80% back better border control and 71% favor creating a pathway to citizenship for immigrants now in the United States illegally if they meet certain requirements. That's all for today. I'll be back with you tomorrow, Wednesday. Take care.